My name is Michelle Schroeder.
My name is Matt Schroeder.
And this is our Duality. I had a good upbringing, but we weren't always involved in a church. I went to a private school in Yale from 4th grade through 8th grade. I would say that's probably where a lot of my foundation came from.
She never gave us a hard time, never. She was a couple incidents in high school, kid things, but nothing serious until after she graduated.
And I wanted to go to Oakland University, had my heart set on nursing, and I started out there, and things just kind of turned sour. I got in with the wrong group, started to make some bad choices.
She started dating, and we didn't know that at the time.
And I moved out of my home with my parents and moved in with him. He was abusive, not always physically, but definitely verbally. He had hit me one time, but I thought things would get better. About 2 weeks before Christmas, almost a year into it, I think, I called my mom and asked if I could come home, and they came and moved me, and I went back home. Life went on. I worked, had a good job, but that year that I came back, the year after I graduated, I just went to a New Year's Eve party with some friends. They said, let's go out to a club. And long story short, I ran into my ex-boyfriend. We kind of reconnected that night and started another relationship. I knew that my family wouldn't approve. My mom just happened I lived in Rochester at this point, in an apartment, and he was over. It was a weekend, and my mom showed up unexpectedly. And she was like, "Who is that?" And so she found out that day.
I didn't tell my husband for a whole year. I knew about it, but we had kept trying to get her to end that.
Nobody accepted it. Nobody felt that it was in my best interest. Everybody tried to talk me out of it. He had a big drinking problem in the beginning of our relationship. And I knew that it was wrong because I didn't grow up in a home with alcohol. But I continued the relationship because I was determined to make it work. And I don't know if I did it out of spite, to prove everybody wrong. And during that time of dating, things were not good. They were up and they were down. But I always had a hope that if I loved him enough and I did the right things, that he would love me in return. So we dated for a couple of years, and he asked me to marry him. I sat down and told my dad that I was seeing him, and he was like, "Let me meet him." And he took it very well.
He said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, there's nothing we can do." Michelle was older, she had been to college, and it wasn't like she was 17 years old, And so we said, well, we're not going to lose our daughter. We're going to love her.
So we had a big, beautiful wedding. Things just got better after we got married. I ended up with a really good job. I used to work 60, 70 hours a week. And I would come home and he would just be laying down drinking a beer or having had a few beers. And so I was starting to realize that when I have a baby, I don't want to raise my kids in this kind of an atmosphere. So that really started to play in my heart, and I still didn't have that relationship with the Lord. We started to go to church, and he went with me. We went to a church in Romeo. Things were good. Things were much better than they had been. The drinking had subsided, and he had a daughter from a previous relationship. We received a call that she had been removed from her home, and if we didn't take her and take custody of her, she was going into foster care. We ended up getting her. We went through a long process, had to hire an attorney, but she ended up coming to live with us. And then I got pregnant with Jimmy. Jimmy was born in February of 2000. And it just seems like things just started to go downhill again. He was fantastic when he was born, but within about 6 months, the drinking started to continue. He wouldn't come home at night. And I knew, again, that I didn't want Jimmy to be exposed to these things. I really started to pull back and realize that I'd made a mistake. My parents lived in Yale, and they helped me all the time when I needed help, but they weren't close enough. And I knew that I needed to be closer to my parents and to my family because I knew what the future probably held for me and Jimmy. We purchased a home in K-Pac that was closer to my family, and things just really got bad at that point. And I specifically remember pulling over in front of Mr. R's one day and just calling my mom and saying, I can't do this anymore. And her saying, just leave and come home. The final straw was I was swimming in the pool with a friend and the kids one day, and the police came to my door, and he had gotten in trouble with the police, and they had been, my home had been under surveillance for a few weeks, and they advised me to leave for my own protection and for Jimmy's protection. And so that was kind of the turning point. After the divorce, Jimmy would sporadically go for visits. There were a lot of disappointments in that time.
I didn't really feel safe. I don't know, one time, me and my half-sister were at his house. He showed up, and I guess he was gonna make us like dinner or lunch or something. And he was making hot dogs on the stove, and he passed out in his bed, and the hot dogs started burning. The house was full, like the apartment was full of smoke. The neighbors actually came in. They, I think they like kicked the door in or something and brought us out and took us there, and they couldn't wake him up. They couldn't get him out of his bed. So that was a pretty scary moment. I kind of knew what was going on, so I really didn't want to know because I felt like it would kind of wreck me. I can remember a couple times when he would promise and he wouldn't show up, and that was really hard because like you're like, does he not like me anymore? Am I not worth it? Stuff like that.
And then Matt and I met in 2004. We met in 2004 and dated for 2 years. That happened in the midst of all that. I wouldn't let him be a part of Jimmy's life because I swore I would never let somebody hurt him. And I needed to be sure that he was going to be the right one before I did that.
Yeah, I remember when they started to date. I was super antsy. The longest time it was just me and my mom, and I was like, okay. And it was just like, it felt like something was missing in a way. And then he came, and then it was just super awesome. He'd bring me like a ton of presents and stuff. It was great.
She invited me over for dinner, and I'm a dumb idiot. She's like, after church, she goes, come over for dinner. I'm like, oh, okay. So I went over for dinner. I figured I was
Naive.
Yeah, I was very naive. And I'm like, whatever, cool. So I went over for dinner and ate, and it was great. And that's when we kept talking. We'd spend hours out in the church parking lot, and he'd be running around. So it wasn't that I didn't get to see Jimmy. We never let on that it was any more than just friends.
Before they got married, me and my cousin were sitting at the table, and he walks in, and we're like, hey, come here. When are you going to ask her to marry you? It was so funny. And he was like so stunned. It was hilarious.
If you're a Christian, marry a Christian man. Be sure that he is founded in his faith. You're always going to have issues, you know. No, there's no perfect marriage. But if you follow the Lord's will, it just saves you from having a lot of extra problems.
We went through infertility testing for a very long time. And in the process, I've had 5 miscarriages. So that was interesting because there was no rhyme or reason. We went to the doctor. We went through all the testing. We tried some treatments, and they were like, we have no idea. Like, we have no idea why you can't get pregnant or why you're miscarrying. And so I think from that point,
That's when we went into the fostering.
that's when we went into the fostering, and we were like, this is just God's plan.
Our first placement, and I don't know, Michelle thought I was nuts, probably, but when we had the first two, they came in and we were put in the bed, the first night? They were laying in bed, and they were 3 and 5, and the 3-year-old, after he got done saying prayers, he goes, if they come a-shooting, are you gonna protect us? And I'm looking at Michelle, and I'm like, what did you get us into? Like, what do you mean? This kid's 3 years old, and he's asking about if somebody's gonna shoot him. But that's the environment they came out of, and I think that's what really started, is you heard these kids' story, and it was heartbreaking. And that really drove me to, you wanted to help these kids, and they were, I don't remember any of them that didn't want that attention, that just, and we watched ones that had, you know, they had been hurt, they'd been burned, they had been not taken care of, they've managed on their own. And I think it just, as we continued through, and it seemed it went pretty fast, but as they kept coming, I couldn't say no. When they're like, we don't have a place for this kid to go tonight. Like, how can we say no? We got to give them a place. We have a house, and we can bring them in and love them.
I was really excited when we started because, I mean, I knew that we were helping people, and I knew that we were helping those kids. But then it was like you'd get so attached to them. I'd get so attached because they'd be here for like a year and a half, and then they'd get ripped away. Like, their grandma took them, or somebody else that's a relative wants them, and then that was really hard. That was really devastating.
We had 13.
Yeah, we had 13. So
over
through
the course of 2.5 years.
You started to realize that it was God's purpose that these kids would come and we would pour into them and love them and show them something that most of them didn't have. And we said prayers with them and said bedtime stories and taught them. They went to church with us, and you realize that we're in each of their lives for that short time. And I think it was just to pour into them. But every time that you would think, yep, here, they're going to stay, they would leave again.
One situation, we had a little girl. They called us from the hospital. She was born. And bio mom had already lost a child. And so the process was to go directly for termination. So they asked us if we wanted her. Another case, we were going to adopt her. We just had to go through the motions. So Matt and I went up. She was a day old, and we started to feed her and bond with her, and just connect, holding her. And we were just up there until she came home. She had jaundice, so she came home at 5 days old. And we had her until 2 weeks before her 1-year birthday, and she ended up going back to a parent. So that was I think that's when I was like, okay, I've got to shut these emotions off and build up a wall. I can love these kids, but I can't love these kids because it's just too heartbreaking. It broke our hearts. It broke his heart even more than it broke my heart.
So that was kind of hard. And when we actually came to Nick and Jeremy, you were ready for him to leave. She was 100%. She's like, I'm not getting attached. They're going back, and her
They
cousin,
were supposed to go back. They were the only two that came to us that we were told they will not be staying with you. All the other children, we were told that they were going to be adoptable. It was just we had to go through a process. And so I was determined I was not going to get attached in the beginning.
But then your cousin told you, Debbie,
Yeah.
told you those two, for whatever reason, those two are going to stay. And you're like, no, they're not. They're going back 100%. And, well, they stayed.
Sit up and eat.
Nick, what's the look like? That's the look Mom does?
Yeah.
What happens when she does that look?
She usually flicks it where you can't see it. She just goes like this.
Ow!
See, you didn't see it, did you?
Nick was 16 months and Jeremy was 4 months when they were placed in our home. During the process, you work with the biological parents. That's the procedure. And so I would have to take them to visits. They had a maternal grandmother and an older brother, biological brother as well. So I would do visits with them periodically. Bio mom had 2 visits a week, or one or two. I think it was. We started out 1, and then we went to 2. So I got to know her, and I work. Some of these moms, I tried to be a mentor and try to teach them, not just the Lord at that point, but just how to be a mom. And I would try really hard as a ministry to minister to them in different ways. And so I got to spend a little bit of time with her throughout the time that they were with us. And it came down to she just couldn't get it together. She would try, and she loved her kids. No doubt in my mind that she loved her boys, but she just didn't know how to be a mom. She'd been in the system herself. Her mom had been in the system herself. It had just been a cycle over and over. And so she was in and out of, she would drop dirty drug tests, and they would test her, and then she'd have a clean one, and then she'd have a dirty one. And so when they were almost 3 and almost 2, the court was going to go for termination. And so they asked us, at that point, they knew that we were interested. There was no doubt in our mind. I mean, we knew that God had placed them with us for a reason. We grew to love them as much as we love Jimmy. There's no difference. I was in the parking lot with the bio mom.
That was in December,
and
right?
I think so. And they were going for termination of rights, and she knew that. And she said to me, "Are you going to adopt my boys? Will you and Matt adopt them?" And usually it's not anything that the bio mom knows. It's a closed adoption. But I told her that we would. But she said, "If you promise me that you will take care of my boys, I will sign my rights off." And so she did. We didn't have to go through any of the proceedings. We went to a court hearing. She signed the papers, and it was that simple, which is unheard of. That just doesn't happen. And I think that's really when it solidified with us. God, we were where the boys needed to be. That God just totally put them in our lives.
Before they decided that they were going to adopt them, they sat me down on the table in the kitchen, and they talked to me about it and asked me what I felt about it. I felt really excited. I wanted brothers. It was getting pretty lonely being by yourself. Yeah, definitely made the right decision.
At Phoebe's house? Matt Shepard came and towed her to the house? I'm just kidding. They say like I keep saying pee-pee.
Oh my.
No, that's Pastor Paul.
Pastor Paul, that's what they call him.
That's not respectful to a pastor.
Tell Pastor Steve that.
You said that when he was on the 4-wheeler. You said, you brought up a picture and you said, "Oh, look at Mr. PP." What?
We heard a lot of negativity, like, why would you do that? Why would you take these kids into your home? How can you love them? How can you go through the pain of having to give them back? I think it's a church's obligation. Christ tells us to take care of these kids.
And he tells us, in his word to do that and to take care of the orphans and the widows. And I think our whole life is a blessing, but when we started fostering, I think we were blessed more than we could have ever imagined.
People need to realize that a child is a child, and they're a child of God. And I think God gives you I think he opens your heart to it. He's the one that he opened us up to it.
And I can't imagine life without.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, without Jimmy, because of the biological part of it. But I can't even imagine our lives without Nick and Jeremy at all. I don't even remember what that time was like without them.
Feels like it's a family that should be like even though we might not all originated from the same place, we're all one together. And it's I feel like we're a unit, and we work well with each other.
Nick and Jeremy, who's your favorite older brother? Can you point to him? Can you guys do me a favor and point to Mom? Can you point to Dad?
That's Dad.
None of them are biologically mine, but I love them all. I mean, they are mine. I've always been Dad, you know, and he's my kid. I mean, I don't look at any of them as, well, they're somebody else's. They're 100% mine.
Like, I don't look and see my brothers and like, hey, you're somebody else's kid. And I look at my dad like, what are you doing? Like, you're not the one that had me. Yeah, I feel like we fit in together.
My name is Matt,
My name is Michelle,
and our home would be broken.
but for God.
Can we be in your movies now?
Can you be in the movies?
Yeah.
What are you guys gonna do? What's your skills?
I don't know.
Wrestling?
Uh-huh.
So you want to be in like a wrestling movie?
Uh-huh. I can do this. Good enough?